Someone just left you their entire wealth, and the truth behind this unexpected inheritance may touch your heart in a way you never imagined. Take a slow breath before you continue, because this message is written as a spiritual, inspirational story, not as a claim that a real inheritance has been legally left to you. Sometimes a powerful message arrives in the form of a story about wealth, destiny, unexpected blessings, and a person whose life was connected to yours in ways you never fully understood. Something happened last night, in the quiet hours, when most of the world had already gone silent. A story began unfolding that seemed almost impossible to explain. Somewhere, in a room filled with old memories, carefully preserved documents, photographs, and objects that had survived years of change, a name appeared, your name. At first, nobody understood why. There was confusion. There were questions. There was disbelief. Someone had to read the information again because it seemed too extraordinary to accept at first glance. A person of considerable wealth had apparently made a decision that would completely change the future of someone they deeply cared about, and then came the question that made everyone pause. Who was this wealthy person? The answer was not what anyone expected. This was not simply a story about money. It was a story about memory. It was a story about kindness. It was a story about a connection that survived distance, silence, misunderstanding, and time, and most importantly, it was a story about how someone can influence another person's life without realizing just how deeply their actions are remembered. You may have wondered why certain people entered your life. You may have wondered why some connections felt meaningful even when they did not last. You may have wondered why certain moments stayed in your memory long after the people involved had moved on. Sometimes we do not understand the importance of a moment while we are living it. A small conversation can become unforgettable. A simple act of kindness can remain in someone's heart for years. A few encouraging words can become the reason someone continues when they were ready to give up, and sometimes, the person who received that kindness never forgets it. That is where this story begins. The wealthy person in this message was not necessarily someone you expected to remember you. In fact, that may be the most surprising part. You may have assumed that they had forgotten. You may have thought that your connection with them belonged to another chapter. You may have believed that whatever happened between you was simply part of the past. But imagine discovering that the opposite was true. Imagine learning that someone had carried the memory of you quietly for years. Imagine finding out that they remembered something you had completely forgotten, a sentence, a gesture, a moment when you showed compassion, a time when you helped without asking for anything in return, a moment when everyone else walked away, but you stayed. That kind of memory can become priceless, and that is why the inheritance in this story is bigger than money. It represents recognition. It represents gratitude. It represents the possibility that something you gave freely may have mattered far more than you ever realized. Last night, in this symbolic story, the truth finally came to light. A document was opened, a name was discovered, a conversation began, and suddenly, the people around this situation realized that the story they thought they understood was incomplete. There was another chapter. There was another reason. There was another secret. and that secret was connected to you. You might ask, why me? That question is important, because when unexpected blessings appear in our imagination, our first instinct is often to question whether we deserve them. You may have spent so much time surviving, struggling, waiting, or rebuilding that receiving something good can almost feel unfamiliar. You may be used to giving more than receiving. You may be used to helping others while keeping your own difficulties private. You may be accustomed to telling yourself that you will be okay, even when you do not know exactly how everything will work out. But this message invites you to consider another possibility. What if your life is not defined only by what you have lost? What if the future contains opportunities you cannot see yet? What if a chapter you believed was finished still has something meaningful to teach you? The wealthy person in this story understood something that many people discover only after years of living. Money can purchase comfort, but it cannot purchase genuine loyalty. Money can create opportunities, but it cannot manufacture sincere affection. Money can open doors, but it cannot force someone to care. At some point, wealth becomes less important than legacy. The question becomes, what did my life mean? Who did I help? Who remembers me for the right reasons? What will remain after I am gone? And perhaps that was the reason your name appeared, not because you demanded anything, not because you expected anything, but because you represented something meaningful. Maybe you reminded this person of a better version of themselves. Maybe you were kind to them during a difficult period. Maybe they witnessed your character when you thought nobody was paying attention. Maybe they saw something in you that you did not yet recognize in yourself. There is something powerful about being seen when you are not trying to impress anyone. The person in this story may have seen your character during an ordinary moment. Perhaps you were tired, perhaps you were struggling, perhaps you were simply being yourself, and yet, something about that moment remained unforgettable. Years later, that memory could still carry weight. That is why this message asks you to reconsider something. Do not underestimate the impact of small kindnesses. Do not assume that because someone did not thank you immediately, they did not appreciate what you did. Do not assume that silence means forgetfulness. People sometimes carry gratitude quietly. They may never find the right words. They may never return to explain. They may move across cities, build new lives, become successful, experience losses, and change completely. Yet somewhere inside them, an old memory can remain untouched. That is the emotional heart of this story. And then there is the soulmate connection. The person you think about when you hear the word soulmate may be connected to this story symbolically. Perhaps the inheritance is not actually about a bank account. Perhaps it represents an inheritance of wisdom, an inheritance of courage, an inheritance of healing, an inheritance of opportunity, an inheritance of lessons passed from one life chapter into another. Your soulmate, in this inspirational story, may be learning that love is not always about possessing someone. Sometimes love is about wanting the other person to have a better future. Sometimes love means protecting someone's opportunity. Sometimes love means leaving behind something valuable because you believe the person deserves a chance to build something beautiful. And that is why the wealthy person's identity becomes so important. The story suggests that the person was closer to your world than you expected, not necessarily a stranger. Not necessarily someone you barely knew, but someone whose presence intersected with your journey, someone whose story crossed yours, someone who may have noticed your strength before you did. Perhaps they were connected to your family, perhaps they were connected to someone important from your past. Perhaps they knew a person who spoke about you with admiration. Perhaps they simply encountered you during a moment that changed their perspective. The mystery is not meant to frighten you. It is meant to make you reflect. How many people have you influenced without knowing? How many people remember you more warmly than you imagine? How many moments that seemed ordinary actually mattered? You cannot know all the answers. And you do not need to, because your value does not depend on receiving an inheritance. Your worth existed before anyone noticed it. Your future does not depend on a mysterious document. Your future is shaped by the choices you make, the people you trust, the opportunities you pursue, and the courage you develop. The inheritance in this story is therefore a symbol of something larger. It represents the return of value, the return of hope, the return of confidence, the return of possibility. Sometimes life takes something from us before teaching us what we truly need. A door closes, a friendship changes, a relationship ends, an opportunity disappears, a plan fails. And for a while, we believe that loss is the final chapter, but life can be strange. The thing that feels like an ending can become preparation. The silence can become space. The delay can become protection. The disappointment can become redirection. And the person who thought they were forgotten can discover that their story was still being remembered somewhere. That is what makes the symbolic inheritance so powerful. It says, "You were not invisible, you mattered. Your kindness had value. Your presence made an impression. Your story is not finished." Imagine the moment when the information was finally explained. Someone sits down. There is a pause. The document is placed on the table. Questions begin. The name is confirmed. And then the realization arrives. The wealthy person had intentionally chosen you. The room becomes quiet. People look at one another. Nobody knows exactly what to say. And perhaps you would not know what to say either, because sometimes the biggest surprises do not immediately create happiness. They create disbelief. You may wonder whether it is real. You may question the reason. You may wonder what the person wanted. You may wonder whether there is something hidden behind the decision. Those questions are natural. In any real-world situation involving an inheritance, legal documents, estates, or money, everything should be independently verified through appropriate legal and financial professionals. Never send money or personal information to someone merely because they claim that you have inherited wealth. But inside this spiritual story, the inheritance carries a different message. It tells you to stop thinking of yourself as someone who must always wait for permission to believe in a better future. You can begin preparing for better things now. You can become more responsible with what you have. You can develop skills. You can build healthy relationships. You can learn. You can save. You can create. You can forgive. You can grow. You can become the kind of person who knows how to handle blessings without losing themselves. because receiving something valuable is not the same as knowing what to do with it. That may be another lesson hidden inside the story. The wealthy person did not simply want you to possess something, they wanted their decision to mean something. Maybe they wanted you to continue a value they believed in, maybe they wanted you to help others. Maybe they wanted you to create something lasting, maybe they wanted you to have the stability they never had, maybe they saw that you had potential and wanted to give that potential room to breathe. This is where the soulmate theme becomes even deeper. A soulmate connection, when treated as an inspirational idea, is not simply about romance. It can represent recognition. Two people recognizing something meaningful in each other's lives. Two people encouraging growth. Two people arriving at the same emotional lesson from completely different paths. Sometimes the person you think is your soulmate may not be the person who gives you everything. Sometimes they are the person who teaches you that you already possess something valuable within yourself. Maybe your soulmate is learning this too. Maybe they have spent a long time believing they needed to control everything. Maybe they believed security could be purchased. Maybe they believed success meant never needing anyone. Then something happened. They saw your character. They saw your resilience. They saw how you continued after disappointment, and their understanding of love changed. Because genuine connection is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is quiet, sometimes it appears as respect, sometimes it appears as concern, sometimes it appears as wanting someone to succeed even when you cannot stand beside them, and sometimes it appears as a decision to leave something meaningful behind. The story of the wealthy person may therefore be a mirror. It asks you, what are you leaving behind? Not money, not property, not possessions. What are you leaving behind in the hearts of other people? Are you leaving kindness? Are you leaving encouragement? Are you leaving honesty? Are you leaving wisdom? Are you leaving people feeling stronger because they knew you? That is a form of wealth nobody can steal. You might not realize it yet, but every day you are building a legacy. Every conversation matters. Every decision matters. Every time you choose patience instead of cruelty, you shape the person you become. Every time you keep going after disappointment, you strengthen your future self. Every time you refuse to become bitter, you protect something precious inside you. And perhaps that is why this message found you at this moment. Not to promise you a suitcase of money, not to tell you that a mysterious fortune is guaranteed, but to remind you that unexpected blessings can take many forms: a new opportunity, a restored friendship, a creative breakthrough, a second chance, a healthier relationship, a new direction. A door opening after a long period of uncertainty. A person finally understanding your value. These things can feel like inheritances too. They arrive carrying lessons from the past. They give you resources for the future, and they ask you to become someone who can use them wisely. Now imagine the wealthy person looking back over their life. They remember achievements. They remember difficult years. They remember people who came and went. They remember moments when money solved problems and moments when money could solve nothing. Eventually, one memory rises above the others. Your memory. Perhaps they remember your voice. Perhaps they remember your kindness. Perhaps they remember a moment when you did something nobody expected. perhaps they remember how you treated someone who had nothing to offer you. That detail could have changed everything, because character reveals itself most clearly when there is nothing to gain. If you helped someone without expecting recognition, that says something about you. If you showed compassion when nobody was watching, that says something about you. If you kept your integrity when taking the easier path would have benefited you, that says something about you. And perhaps the wealthy person valued those qualities more than anything money could buy. That is the secret hidden beneath the title. The person was wealthy, but what they truly wanted to pass on was meaning. And now the question becomes what you would do if you received something valuable. Would you allow it to change who you are, or would you use it to become more of who you already are? The second choice is the healthier one. Success should not erase your character. Comfort should not make you forget compassion. Opportunity should not make you forget humility. And wealth, real or symbolic, should never become the measure of your worth. Your soulmate may be learning this lesson too. Maybe they have watched you struggle and wondered why you continued. Maybe they have questioned why you remained hopeful. Maybe they have wondered how you could still care after being disappointed. They may have their own story. They may have their own fears. They may be facing decisions you cannot see. But the message here is not that you should wait for someone else to rescue you. It is that you should recognize your own strength. If someone comes into your life and supports your growth, appreciate it. If someone believes in you, listen. If someone offers you a genuine opportunity, consider it carefully. But never surrender your judgment simply because a story sounds miraculous. Real blessings do not require you to abandon common sense. Real love does not require you to ignore boundaries. Real opportunity does not require secrecy, pressure, or fear, and a genuine inheritance, if one ever occurs in real life, should be verified through proper legal channels. The spiritual lesson remains powerful without pretending that a fictional story is a factual prediction. You are allowed to hope. You are allowed to dream. You are allowed to believe that your future can be better than your past. And you are allowed to imagine that something wonderful may still be waiting for you. Perhaps that is what happened last night in the symbolic sense. A door opened. A possibility appeared, a forgotten memory returned, and someone realized that your name belonged in a story they had been carrying for years. But there is another twist. The inheritance may not have been intended merely for you. It may have been intended to awaken you, to make you ask what you truly want, to make you stop postponing your dreams, to make you stop measuring your life against someone else's timeline, to make you understand that abundance begins with how you see possibility. You can have very little and still possess an abundant spirit. You can have money and still feel empty. You can have everything people admire and still lack peace. So perhaps the greatest inheritance is peace. The ability to sleep without regret, the ability to wake up without pretending, the ability to love people without controlling them, the ability to forgive without forgetting your boundaries, the ability to pursue success without becoming consumed by it, the ability to recognize that your life is valuable even before the world applauds you. That is wealth. And that is something nobody can take away from you. The story also carries a message about timing. You may have experienced periods when everything seemed delayed, you wanted answers. But they did not arrive, you wanted clarity, but circumstances remained confusing, you wanted someone to recognize your efforts, but they seemed unnoticed, you wanted a door to open, but it stayed closed, then suddenly, something changed. That is how life often feels. Nothing, 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 and then movement. One conversation changes the direction. One opportunity appears. One person calls. One idea arrives. One decision creates a chain reaction. The important thing is not to become obsessed with predicting the exact moment. Instead, become ready for change. Prepare yourself emotionally. Prepare yourself practically. Prepare yourself financially. Prepare yourself spiritually. Build a life that can welcome good news without depending on good news for its happiness. That is maturity. And that is the lesson your symbolic inheritance is carrying. Maybe your soulmate is also reaching a turning point. Perhaps they are beginning to understand that waiting forever is not the same as being patient. Perhaps they are realizing that silence cannot solve everything. Perhaps they are finally recognizing the value of honest communication. Perhaps they are learning that people can lose precious opportunities when they are too afraid to speak, but you do not need to force their journey. You cannot control another person's timing. You can only control your own choices. If someone truly belongs in your life, healthy communication, mutual respect, and honest actions will matter far more than mysterious signs. And if a person does not treat you with respect, no dramatic spiritual message